Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Hope you're all doing well. I wanted to talk about home labs today. Now I know I talk about them a lot, but today specifically I wanted to give a proper tour and walkthrough of my home lab here and all the different machines I have and the purposes behind all the machines. And hopefully, this could inspire you guys to build something similar, as it's helped me a lot. Now, speaking of that, some of the benefits of having a home lab. I just graduated from university, specifically with a degree in cybersecurity. And I felt in school a lot of the learning was very theory based, meaning, you learn from a book or you learn from a PowerPoint presentation. And I just felt like I needed something that was more hands on. I've done Try Hack Me and Hack the Boxes, and those are cool, but I really wanted to build something from the ground up. And another thing too is that this home lab gives me the ability to learn tools on my own and then add them to my resume. There's some tools like Splunk, which I made a video about last week, where it felt like before, oh, the only way I could learn Splunk and have it on my resume is if I first have a job and gain experience that way. But what I'm able to do with this home lab is actually learn Splunk on my own, download it free for 60 days, and then add that as a skill on my resume. And through doing this home lab, I feel really prepared to be a cybersecurity engineer, and I feel more confident in pursuing cybersecurity roles. Now, my goal with this home lab was to simulate an enterprise environment to test both cyber attacks and red team tactics, as well as defensive strategy. I've done a lot with like identity access management, and so yeah, kind of, a purple team, right? I want to test attacks and I also want to test defensive strategies as well. Now, kind of just starting off with the physical computer I'm on, I am on this old Windows 10 computer right here. It gets the job done. It's got, a Core i7. At the time it had 16 gigabytes of RAM, but I increased it to 32 just so that I could be running plenty of machines all at the same time. Just wanted to make sure I had enough space, but if you're at 16, that's plenty. Now, originally, I didn't start this home lab on this computer. I actually started at first in the cloud with Azure, because as a student, they give you $100 worth of free credits. But, with all the machines I wanted to run, that only lasted me about a month and a half. And so I had to think, okay, where could I switch over that would be sustainable? And I didn't want to use my laptop for that, so I had this old Windows computer, and that's been working just fine. Now, as for the actual virtualization software that I'm using VirtualBox. There's also VMware on Windows, which is really good. And then if you're on Mac, there's UTM and Parallels. And then like I said, you can also create the lab in the cloud if that's something you want to do, but just be aware of the pricing. Now, specifically in my home lab in VirtualBox, I created a domain controller, a component server, and then a Windows 10 workstation, which are all part of a domain called deandomain.local. And the domain controller and component server are running on Windows Server 2022, and the Windows workstation is running Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. I also have a Kali Linux machine for pen testing and attack simulation in my home lab. And recently I got a Windows Server 2008 machine as well for testing Eternal Blue, which I could make a whole nother video on. Super cool exploit. Now, this pfSense router and firewall lay out a lot of the networking needs for the lab. All the VMs are part of an internal network, but the reason they are able to get internet access is through this pfSense router, which is both part of the internal home lab network, but which also utilizes a NAT network where it gets internet access from the host machine and then gives the devices on the internal network internet access as well. Now, if you want, you can also use a bridged adapter to have the virtual machines here be on your home network in case you want to hack your little brother's computer. But I would recommend using an internal network, especially, if you're going to be testing out malware. You don't want there to be any chance of the malware on these virtual machines interacting with other computers on your network. All right, now let's first launch this domain controller, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. Now, on the domain controller, this is where we're going to be hosting Active Directory. So let me open that up real quick. Okay, so Active Directory is super important because it's where you manage the users and computers in your domain. In the case of home lab learning, Active Directory is where I learned a lot about identity access management and authentication. And then through Server Manager, you can install Active Directory domain services and promote the server that you're on to the domain controller. And then you create or join a domain in that whole process. Now, to bring other machines into your domain, like the component server and the workstation computer that I have, um, you'll want to make sure that the other machines are both on the same network as the domain controller and that the preferred DNS server IP address is set to the IP address of the domain controller. So this can be done through Control Panel. You go to Network and Internet, Ethernet, Properties. You go to Internet Protocol version 4, Properties there. You're going to want to make sure that on every machine that the preferred DNS server is the IP address of the domain controller. Okay, now moving over to my component server. This server is where I host specific tools and services. For example, so far I've played around with Delinea Secret Server, and last week you guys saw Splunk Enterprise. Now these tools can be configured through Internet Information Services and are accessed through the browser but are only available to computers within the domain. Now Splunk Enterprise receives logs from forwarders on the other domain join machines, and Delinea is hosted on the component server and can be used on other domain join machines for users that need access to privileged accounts. Yeah, and then also for Delinea Secret Server, I also, with it, had to set up an SQL server database, and this is to keep track and manage all of the data that's associated with Delinea. All right, and so now moving over to my Kali Linux machine. This machine particularly is not part of the domain that I created, but it is on the same internal network as the domain join machines are. What we can do actually to show all of the machines that are on the network from Kali is we can do sudo netdiscover, enter our password, and then we can see some familiar machines from earlier, like the domain controller, the component server right here, and then also that looks like our router. And just to make sure we can actually communicate with them, we can always use ping. Now with having this Kali machine in my home lab, I wanted to simulate the damage that could be done by an attacker who made it on an enterprise network. And Kali Linux also provides all the most widely used exploitation tools to be able to do so. So yeah, that was a quick tour of my home lab. I'm still growing the amount of machines I have as well as the amount of tools I have implemented in my environment. Hopefully this layout gives you guys an idea of something that you could build on your own, and I'll have all the links to where you can download the ISO images of the servers and workstations that I have. I'll have those all linked in the description. And yeah, that's all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.